And hello, everyone. My name is Bridget Brady, and I'm the Communications and Advocacy Coordinator for the Delaware Riverkeeper Network and also the moderator for this evening. So I'm really excited about tonight's panel for a number of reasons. Environmental issues and women's issues are both very near and dear to my heart. And while I've chosen to focus my career on the environment, I really don't see the two as things that you can completely separate out from each other. Like so many things, there's a strong interconnectedness and intersectionality between women's issues and environmental issues, all the way from the philosophical and the spiritual to the day-to-day experiences. And so as we start to have more of these conversations and awareness around the intersectionality of different oppressed groups, I think conversations like this one on the connections between protecting the threatened environment and the experiences of women can really strengthen and complement both movements. And I'm also excited because we have such an impressive panel of women leaders in the environmental field with us tonight. And so with that, I'd like to now invite our panelists who will be speaking tonight to introduce themselves. Our first panelist is Kim Gaddy. Is Kim still on with us?
So Kim has texted me. So for those who don't know, Kim has a family situation going on, and she may or may not be able to chime back in. So for now, I think she had to chime out to deal with her family situation. And as you said, Bridget, before we started this whole thing, that's one of the things that happens, right? When you're a female and a leader, it happens for men too, but more often than not, we have to juggle things. And so hopefully she'll be back, but at this instance, she might not be here.
Okay, great. All right, so our second panelist is Sarah Lowe. Sarah, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks very much for having me. This topic is very close to my heart, as you said too. I am the executive director of the Tacoma Tree Foundation, which is a small nonprofit that I founded about 3 years ago. I used to live in Philadelphia. I was part of Fairmount Park Commission. I was on the Fairmount Park Commission staff, and then Philadelphia Parks and Recreation after that. Did a lot of work in community all over the city. It was a really wonderful experience. And Philadelphia will always be close to my heart, as will the Delaware River. And yeah, I think that's probably enough. Did you want me to say more? I have a background in wildlife conservation, watershed science, and over the years, that sort of led me towards a really strong emphasis on community forestry.
Wonderful, thank you. Okay, and then finally, Maya, go for it.
So, because so many people got on before our beginning of the conversation chit chat, I really did just want to take a moment to acknowledge Nancy Shakaitis. We are very thrilled and honored that her daughter Jennifer, or granddaughter Jennifer, is joining us in this event. And for those who don't know, Nancy Shakaitis is a true hero and leader and champion and inspiration for all advocates for our beautiful Delaware River and our environment, but I think particularly women advocates. She was the champion that really spearheaded the battle against the Tox Island Dam. And if it had not been for Nancy Shakaitis and her tremendous dedication to our beautiful Delaware River, our environment, our communities, and keeping our river free flowing, Tox Island Dam would have been built and we would be dealing with a much, much different river environment. So now that everybody has joined us, I really just wanted to acknowledge and honor Nancy. And maybe if you do have your cocktail, maybe everybody can just take a moment. I don't have my glass is empty for now, but take a moment to just raise your glass for a second to Nancy Shakaitis. We lost her recently. Our heart goes out to Jennifer and her family. And we are just so honored that Nancy was such an important part of the movement to protect our beautiful Delaware River, inspiring so many people. So that's to Nancy. I have had the honor of, in some ways, following in Nancy's footsteps, right? Being able to be a leader and champion for the beautiful Delaware River. I've had the honor of being leader of the 4-state Delaware Riverkeeper Network and the Delaware Riverkeeper since 1994. Being the voice of the Delaware River and leading advocacy for the Delaware River. But of course, we all know that being a voice and an advocate and a champion for a river and watershed as big as the Delaware is not the job of one person. It is the job of a community. And that's what the Delaware Riverkeeper Network is. It's a magnificent community of people coming together to fight for our beautiful Delaware River. And as an outgrowth of my work at the Delaware Riverkeeper Network, I have now also founded a new national movement called Green Amendments for the Generations, which is all about inspiring and helping communities to pass constitutional environmental rights amendments, what I call green amendments, that mimic, mirror, are likened to what we have in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania in Article 1, Section 27 of the Pennsylvania Constitution. There are only 2 states that have an amendment as powerful as Pennsylvania's. One is Pennsylvania and the other is Montana. But our goal at Green Amendments for the Generations, fueled and inspired by what we have accomplished in the Delaware River watershed, is to get a green amendment in every state across the nation and then ultimately at the federal level. And it is just a thrill and an honor to wear both of those hats because they're intimately connected. So, and I am sorry that Kim Gaddy, that we seem to have lost Kim. In case she shows up later, Kim is an amazing environmental justice leader in the state of New Jersey and nationally, and is just such a powerful, powerful voice for environmental justice, really leading the way. And so it is a loss to not have her, but hopefully she'll be able to chime in as her family situation resolves.
Thank you, Maya. That was all really helpful and a beautiful tribute to someone who sounds like they are, exactly what we're talking about tonight, a wonderful women leader in the environmental field. So thank you. Just quickly, before we jump into our conversation and our questions, we wanted to quickly remind everyone of the rules stated at the beginning of the call from Cherry. And you can also find those rules in the chat box now. So thank you all for following these rules so that everyone can enjoy the event. And just a reminder, if you have questions for our panelists throughout the program at any time, just type them into the chat box as you think of them, and our chat wrangler will pass your questions along to me. So we're going to start off tonight with some questions we received in advance, and I'm just going to pose those questions to all of our panelists, so feel free, panelists, to self-select. Otherwise, I'm sure Maya will help direct them appropriately. Okay, so let's get started. So our first question is, how does environmental degradation specifically affect women, and what specific concerns face women when it comes to the environment?
All right, Sarah, that's on you.
I was hoping that was on you. Well, let's see. I guess, being completely honest, I don't feel like I have the best answer for that, because I have been focusing a little bit more on how race relates to environmental stewardship and conservation and environmental justice, and I guess I do feel kind of compelled to say that I've been deeply impacted by the fact that I'm a woman in a since I spent most of my career in the urban forestry side of things in a male-dominated field, and so I have experienced a lot of things firsthand that have been stressful, which is kind of getting into a question that down the road, I think. But one thing that I think it's important that I try to keep close to me is that while that is difficult, being a woman in the workplace, it is more difficult experiencing racism, and that when it comes to health outcomes, race is the biggest predictor for health outcomes. And so I think it's kind of hard to separate how does being a woman and race relate becomes really challenging. I don't entirely feel qualified, even though I don't like the word qualified, actually, and I might mention that later. I think qualifications is problematic, but I think one thing I would say is that women this year, I mean, there's been lots of news about women and COVID, and particularly around caregiving, whether it's caregiving children or family members or other people in their lives, often take on a lot more things at home. And, you know, any additional sort of burden I think that people have, it just increases the amount of stress, and that's not always acknowledged. And so I think maybe I'll stop there, and because I feel like Maya does have more to say on this.
That's because Maya has a lot to say about everything. So, but Bridget, can you say the question again? Because I want to make sure that I'm properly orienting my head to answer it.
Of course. So how does environmental degradation specifically affect women, and what specific concerns face women when it comes to the environment?
So I don't want to come off sounding sexist to the men in the who are joining us, but I do think that that harm to the environment hits women in a different way. I think it hits our hearts and our minds and our souls in the same way it hits everybody, right? Like, I know that Fred Stein and Kevin During and Bob Meek, all of who are wonderful, wonderful environmentalists joining us this evening, I know that they care so deeply about the environment and are deeply touched when it's harmed. And as I think are all people. But I think that when there's pollution and degradation, I think that women see it from a number of different angles. And so I know that I think about it through the lens of my children as well. And again, that's not to be dismissive of men, but I think the connectivity that women have with their children and their grandchildren and future generations, and that mindfulness of perpetuity and connection from a mother to a child, to a child, to a child, is much more deeply held in a different way, because we literally carry children in our bodies before they're born. And so I think that there is a much deeper hurt and harm and fear and worry when we see pollution and degradation. At least there is for me. I think also when trying to rise up to defend the environment, I think it's dramatically different for a woman than a man. Right? We rise up with power and intelligence and facts and figures and passion and information. And inevitably, when we stand up to speak truth to power or to express our concerns, there is always a bunch of men in the room who are really willing and wanting to very quickly try to shut us down, not with their own facts and figures and information or different interpretation or different perspective, but by being dismissive and insulting because we're a woman. And so that also, I think, adds a different layer of concern or mindfulness when you're rising up to be a champion. And then there's also the reality after you leave the room that, you know, women always, when you're walking alone in the streets in a dark place, right, we have to be mindful in a different way than men. But there have been plenty of times when I've had to leave a really hostile hearing room and walk out into that dark parking lot by myself. And you take the anger that was in the room directed at you as an environmentalist, because inevitably it's there, and you sort of add it to your natural mindfulness as a woman that you are perhaps more vulnerable to attack. And it sort of, you know, heightens your sensitivities. I've had plenty of times, I can think right now of a time after a hearing about the Dark Hollow Dam. And boy, oh boy, those people were really angry with myself, with the Delaware Riverkeeper Network, with Tracy Carluccio, my partner in crime, so to speak, at the Delaware Riverkeeper Network on the Dark Hollow Dam issue. But I remember walking out to that parking lot after the hearing was over, talking to all the people, and I ended up going late, and I walked out in the parking lot, it was very dark, and suddenly I found myself surrounded by 4 very large, very angry men. You know, and it's a little bit frightening. And then they, of course, wanted to chastise me, but I didn't want to be chastised. So then I get my back up and then I get angry. And that's perhaps a little bit silly, but I do that. But you do have just that, right? There are all these different layers that happen when a woman feels or sees or experiences or tries to rise up against environmental pollution and degradation.
Thank you. So I think you guys both actually touched on our next couple of questions. So I'm going to jump around a little bit in our ordering, but I think the next question would be, so we know that inclusion doesn't stop with the hiring process, but must continue by addressing the structures and barriers that have left voices out and may continue to exclude them even when they're in the room. How can activists and leaders from other environmental organizations and agencies foster greater inclusion in their workplaces and in the field in general to ensure that marginalized voices are not only included, but actively listened to and heard?
Okay, Sarah, it sounds perfect for you to go first.
Okay, yes, I have a lot to say on this. I don't know how much I'll say, but let's see. So I think one of the things I've been thinking about a lot lately, especially, is that there's a big difference, and this is not my thought. This comes from listening to other people. That there is a difference between inviting people into a space that is predominantly white and making a space in which it is kind of authentically a place of belonging, and kind of pushes inclusion even further towards that sense, like everybody can be themselves in this space and can belong. And with that, I think is a need to understand what the culture in the room is at any given time. And I think sometimes I'll like place myself as like I'm a white woman of European, Irish German ethnicity, and there are sometimes unspoken rules in a setting based on who's in the room, and people feel those rules, but they're not, because they're not spoken, they're sort of assumed to be like, this is how things are, and it sort of becomes inherently exclusive. So I think it's really like getting a comfort around speaking up about what those unspoken cultures are. And it's not always like negative stuff. It's just saying like, oh, in this setting, we're always 5 minutes on time. That's sort of like the way people feel like that's the setting here. Whereas in another setting, it's everybody shows up when they show up, and that's all good. That just being one example. I think there are like many, many examples like that. I think one thing that comes to mind that I've been thinking about a lot, and I'm sort of crossing, I think, over a couple of questions again, but is this idea of like perfectionism, which I think shows up a lot in spaces that I'm in. And it's hard. I think like this is where it's like when it's hard to be a woman in a space where there's an expectation for perfectionism, because if you become the vulnerable person saying like, I don't think that, you know, perfectionism does not create an inclusive environment, and it leads people towards really burnout, I guess is where I'll go with that. So being able to say like, you know, this is maybe something happening in the culture of the space that is not helpful to everybody or is inherently exclusive. Really, I do think help changes the way that people feel like they can belong in a place, and I hope that makes sense. I feel like it's a little lofty, but I'll pause there and maybe we'll come back to that.
Great.
So,
we've gotten a couple of requests to repeat the question before you respond, Maya, because I know it was a long one, so I'm just going to quickly repeat it. We know that inclusion does not stop with the hiring process, but must continue by addressing the structures and barriers that have left voices out and may continue to exclude them even when they're in the room. How can activists and leaders from other environmental organizations and agencies foster greater inclusion in their workplaces and the field in general to ensure that marginalized voices are not only included, but actively listened to and heard?
Oh, maybe I can just add one more thing that is like a really big thing for me. Can I? I'm sorry. Like, is pay equity. It's like huge. Pay equity is the biggest thing that I know of as a thing, an action we can do is striving towards pay equity, and acknowledging that when people are participating, that their time is valuable, and it's not just saying thank you, but it's also finding ways to compensate them for their time if possible. So yeah, I'll stop there because I can really go off on pay equity. and I've also experienced a lot of pay inequity, and I've seen a lot of other people experience that too, both women and people of color.
So, so just so you know, because Kim hasn't joined us, and so we have some extra space, I am being mindful of some people I know who are joining us this evening, who may be some other great women leader voices. And so I'm trying to ask you in the chat privately if you'll be interested in speaking up. But if you have a point, maybe chat me, and we'll see if we can include some other voices, seeing as we have some additional space here. But I think that really, I think Sarah gave an excellent answer. For me, a lot of it is just about making sure I really take the time to connect with people, and making sure that I ask honest questions. I know what it's like to be a woman activist. I don't know what it's like to be a Black woman activist. I don't know what it's like to be a Native American woman activist or Indigenous leader. And so I think it can be sometimes difficult, but I think finding those private moments and spaces when you have the opportunity with colleagues in your organization, in other organizations, or different people in the room that you're spending more and more time with because you're working on an issue, trying to find that time to have some honest conversation, and be honest that there are things I need to understand. And if you can, help me understand how to speak about an issue, or am I overstepping? Am I using the wrong terminology? That I find very, very helpful, just earnestness and honestness. And then I think also for me, I naturally want to jump in because I do have a lot of passionate beliefs and feelings about the environment, and things that I think need to be said, but also being mindful that it's important for me to step back just personally and make sure that there isn't just space for other voices, but that new people who are coming to the dynamic, coming to a table, coming to a hearing, coming to a debate, whatever the issue is, and very purposefully, encouraging others who are perhaps in more marginalized communities to take the podium first. Maybe it's not a literal podium, but take the opportunity to speak first, and doing so though in a kind and respectful way that isn't like it is really just about making space. I think that's the only way that I really know how to do it, is just being there in the moment, watching, genuinely listening, encouraging, stepping outside of myself, asking questions when I have the opportunity for my own personal growth, and learning. So it's probably not a very great question. I just try to just really listen and hear and learn and follow my nurturing side of me as a mother, where you're trying to help lift other people up all the time. I did ask Dorina, I don't know if she responded to me, but Dorina Frazera is joining us today. And Dorina has a lot of experience in the agency setting and out of the agency setting, in the environmental setting. And I'm just wondering, Dorina, if maybe you had a thought that you would want to contribute, if you could turn your microphone on, if you were willing to share a few words. And if not, it's okay. I know I'm putting you on the spot.
I was having trouble unmuting myself. Thank you so much. I did kind of respond a little late to one of your earlier questions, and with regard to this statement, my experience has been that with inclusion doesn't, being hired doesn't mean that you're automatically included, because there are times where there are hiring quotas. There's someone's looked at the organizational structure and they've seen, there's a gap, here's somebody who might fit. Women often find themselves in a position of, oh, well, it's a woman, we can fit her in, and we can guide her essentially into the directions we want to be, or we want to go. I'm not being mean. I'm telling it like it is. After being with state government for over 37 years and working in private industry as well, I've found that that's often true. And that means that you have to go in and you have to assert yourself, and you have to have both personal and professional integrity. And you have to understand the issues. And as Maya said, and some of the other responders said, that you look at, women often look at the environmental field from a different perspective. They look at it as a mother, they look at it with, as a daughter, as a sister, as someone who enjoys the environment, whether it's for art or for recreation. And we look at it as something that's here and now. My generation remember the old butter commercial where it was Mother Nature, you know, who was always out there saying, you know, you can't fool Mother Nature. And I think women embody that. That is true. The other thing that I wanted to mention was that women listen. And oftentimes women speak with passion, and that passion is discounted because they're thought to be emotional. But you have to listen beyond the passion to hear the issues that are being brought up, to hear the comments, the science, the real concerns that are being put forth. And I've also experienced a number of times where I've gone to town meetings and I was told to sit there and listen, take notes. And I did that. And then when we left the town meeting, my counterparts, the town meeting was over. They could go home to their lives, to their baseball game, to their kids, to whatever their activities. And I'm taking these notes home with me, and I'm hearing what's happening and saying, well, this is the next step that we have to take. And that then becomes another battle. So I'm hoping things are changing. I see more women in administrative roles. I see more women in science. I see more women leading and directing programs. And I think we're working that balance. And we have lots of great counterparts out there. So it's one more movement that has to continue. So that's my 2 cents. Thank you.
So something that made me think of something that I want to share, and this is, I think speaks to your question, Bridget, but perhaps also more broadly. But, you know, as Dorina said, you know, and I think I noted earlier, you know, often you're told, oh, you're so passionate, like Dorina said, you're so passionate, as though there's something wrong with that, right? Now, if a man rises up with vim and vigor, well, they're never passionate, they're serious. We have to listen to them, right? That passion is seen as power and strength and something to be listened to. Whereas Dorina said, the passion from a woman is whiny and fearful and extreme, and you're overstating, and calm down, right? And you get a lot of that. I often have people, when I'm working with a community, people either tell me, you know, when you testify, you should do it this way, you know, and I'm supposed to give facts and figures or whatever. Or sometimes people tell me, you know, Maya, you really need to give everybody guidance on how they need to do this. And, you know, tell people they should do it this way or that way or this way or that way. And I have the same response all the time, whether somebody's talking to me or suggesting that I should speak to everybody else in anticipation of a hearing that's rising up. Say, I will never tell anybody else how they should testify. I will never tell them how to speak their truth, because the reality is when you are speaking to a decision-making body, there are a lot of personalities up there on the dais, right, that are part of that decision-making process. And they are all different kinds of personalities. And some of them will respond to the passion, and some will respond to the tears, and some will respond to the anger, and some will respond to the facts and figures. Some will respond to the poetry or the song or the music or the art that somebody has brought forth. And you will only be able to hit that the diversity of the decision makers if you allow there to be a diversity of personalities and perspectives and approaches from the speakers, right? That's how we make sure that we cover everybody and every point. And that's why ensuring a diversity of voices, of women, of men, of Black people and brown people, you know, Hispanic people, indigenous people, young people, old people, children. We need to make sure we are making space for all of those different voices, not only because we need that diversity of perspectives to make sure that the right decisions are being heard, but also to make sure that we're reaching the diversity of the decision makers. We don't know what's going to touch each of their hearts and minds. So we can only be assured that we have the best chance of getting to them if we make sure that everybody in the community has a genuine opportunity to be heard in their way, to speak their truth. So I never presume to suggest that I know how you should speak about your issue or your community or your concern, right? Because it's different than mine. And that diversity and that difference is what is so powerful. And that's why making space for everybody and raising everybody up is so, so important, because that's how we are going to succeed.
I'm sorry, Bridget. Okay, you touched on something that I had like written down a little note, because it's another thing I think about a lot, is that you know, yeah, I've always been told I'm too sensitive, which, you know, like turns out to be a really good thing when it comes to like listening to people and being aware of the world around me, and it has a lot of strengths. But for so long, I'll put my age here. I don't always do that, but I'm 44, so that puts me like smack in the middle of, I mean, hopefully, sort of smack in middle age, and that also means I have like 22 years of experience now in postgraduate school. And yeah, and until just recently, I was told I'm too sensitive. Yeah, that I need to talk a certain way or act a certain way, be assertive but not aggressive, speak up but not at the wrong times, you know, like choose your times correctly, and don't make too many waves, but lean in, and all these messages that women get, and maybe men get some of these messages too. I don't know, because I'm speaking from the perspective of a woman in an environment, but it becomes very difficult to find out who you are and who your true voice is, because everybody is trying to manage the volume of your own voice. And then when we talk about like wanting to make space for other voices, for me, at least personally, I've had this kind of struggle of like, well, I'm just sort of getting to a place where I know my voice. And I heard some great advice from somebody, Jamad Canley, who has this sort of, they're like guidelines in every meeting that he does, is speak up and step back. So everybody gets to speak up, but everybody also steps back and lets other people speak up. So it's just like a rule of engagement, basically, which I really like that idea of like, these are the kind of our guiding rules. But yeah, that really hit me too, is this idea like I have to act a certain way in order to be allowed to participate in a space. And the more we can get away from that, you know, let people be their whole selves, their true selves, and bring all their quirks and wonderful stuff with them, the better we are, the better we'll do at, you know, protecting this world and each other.
Except speak up and step back works really great when everybody's playing by the same rules, right? But very, very often, right, when, especially as a female, or I've seen it happen to people from marginalized communities, coming up and they are speaking up and then they're getting shut down. Or there's too much space being made for others, for the white voices, for the male voices. And they are dominating and they take too much time, or they're given more opportunity to speak. And so that's where it becomes really important for powerful, empathetic, listening, watching women to play that to me, sort of to play that moderating role, perhaps even the role of the mother for in that space, to make sure that those who are trying to dominate and shut everybody else down, that I will step in front of them and sort of, sometimes literally, sometimes figuratively, and push them back in order to create the space for others to speak up and step back. And I realize and recognize not everybody has the same kind of personality trait to do that. But for those of us who do have that, who are willing to sort of literally step in front in order to protect space for others or physically protect others, then I think it's more incumbent on us to do that. And I think as women, I think I see it all the time. Women are much more mindful of that and much more inclined to do that. And that may be because of it. And you don't have to actually be a mother as a woman, right? It's just you have that natural instinct of care for others. I think that's sort of part of our DNA in a different way. And so I think we can really tap into that power to push back the domineering ones in order to create the space for others to speak up and step back. Because maybe even more often than not, I find that is an important rule and value that sort of gets laid in some form or another at the beginning of a meeting. But often that is not the rule that's followed unless those of us who are willing to enforce it.
Does anyone else have anything to add? I don't want to cut anyone off. This is really about discussion, so feel free to keep going and building off each other if you want to. But
well, I think maybe I'll just say that I feel like what Maya just said is like a great illustration of the fact that we all bring different things to the table, and we can, if we use our strengths in a cooperative, communicative, I think I made that up, but like in a way that supports community, then everybody gets to be themselves and contribute. And because ultimately that's, I think, what a lot of people want to do. They want to contribute and be a part of things. And especially in the environmental movement, I meet so many people who just want to be involved. They just want to participate. They want to be having a positive influence on the world. And that's not something that people should have to compete for, like that's something we should want more of. And like, I see myself as a kind of, I'm like a gentle, quiet person, I think, not an extrovert, but, kind of, if I had my way, I would just sit under a tree probably. But I have my way of kind of getting to know people and making spaces bigger. And yet everybody has kind of different ways that they can do that and can maybe cultivate that in themselves. Like, what are my strengths that can help create a more expansive community so that we're all working together?
great. Thank you all. That was incredibly insightful and really good advice. And thank you, Jarena, for joining and chiming in as well. So there are a lot of sort of similar themes that run through a lot of our questions and the responses they trigger. So I'm gonna keep skipping through a little bit. What are some of the ways that young environmental leaders can address marginalization in the environmental field?
Say it again.
What are some of the ways that young environmental leaders can address marginalization in the environmental field?
So can I just respond to that first, Sarah? So To me, I think it's just, it's hard for me to think of the answer to that question because I don't think of it as the responsibility of, or different for a young person versus a middle-aged person versus a more mature person. So I actually am not sure how to respond to that question other than to sort of show by example and encourage. And when, you know, just like women get shut down, just like communities of color get shut down, indigenous communities get shut down because of who we are. I see it happen to young people. I do think that the younger generation really has this incredible welcoming openness to everybody, right? Just because they grew up with greater diversity and I think more encouragement in society to be open and embracing and accepting, although we know there are many, many parts of society that are really still, I mean, like, let's be frank, are just really shitty to other people because of the color of their skin or because of their race. But helping young people embrace the that sort of natural equity that they feel towards others and to own their power and to be willing and wanting to speak up. So it's sort of more of that space support kind of thing that we talked about earlier. But that being said, like, I don't think that there's more or less or different responsibility. It's just a matter of if you have more experience, being more encouraging and supportive to young people to make sure they understand that it's not just okay for them to speak up, but they actually have a duty to speak up, you know, and use their power and strength to support others. Oh, I see a beautiful little face in the background. Hello. I only saw an eye.
Well, I think one way that we can, well, I guess this is one. I think I remember when I was in college, or when I got my first job out of college, my mom said, don't talk about your personal life. Don't talk about your boyfriend. Don't talk about where you live. Don't talk about any of your personal stuff at work. And you know, that was because she had been taught, or she had from experience learned that it wasn't really safe for her to talk about having, I mean, I actually went to work with her a lot, so I don't know if that, anyway, she felt, I think, that it was a sort of problematic if, I guess yeah, actually I have to think about that a little bit more, but anyway, where I was going with that really is that people are in different places in their life, and not necessarily based on age, but that wherever a person is in their life, whether they're a young person trying to like get into a workplace, trying to know that you're part of the community and that you're contributing to that community either positively or negatively, and that the advantages you have as a young person you may not have as your life changes, and likewise the things that you feel you may not have now are yeah, I don't know where I was going with that entirely, but I think the kind of sense that I have is that we kind of all need to be in a community where everybody's supporting and affirmative, and acknowledges that, you know, at one point in your life you might be caring for children in your house. Like this year, you know, so many people are caring for children while working, and that's like really changes some of the sort of unspoken rules of, and sometimes spoken rules of the workplace. And at other times you might be able to work basically at your most productive possible self, but that we can't all be the most productive version of ourselves at all times, and having the compassion to recognize that people bring something to the table no matter where they are in their life. And even as a young person in the field, if you're interested in supporting marginalized communities, you're also playing a role in creating that community, I guess, if that makes sense.
So also amongst the audience members is Kate Stauffer, who I've had the great honor of meeting and working with and becoming genuine friends with over a battle over a toxic site. She's a teacher and a real strong activist. And my experience with Kate, she may not want me to say this, is, you know, she has a very powerful voice when she gets up and speaks, and I've watched her encourage and nurture others to speak. But she herself needs a little bit of encouragement, right? Like she doesn't naturally go to the front of the room. She's like, well, maybe so. And then you encourage her. My gosh, she's like a bulldog when she's up there. So I have a feeling that Kate might have something to contribute here. So I don't know, Kate, if you want to turn your microphone and your camera on. I'm putting you on the spot as well, like I did to Dorina. But just from your experience, I have a feeling you might have some thoughts on this.
Yeah, I do. Hi, everybody. It's my husband, Larry, as well. He's a behind the scenes guy. And Maya, when you talked about passion, I think that's it. I thought, you know, I'm quiet for a while until the passion starts bubbling up in me. And Sarah, everything you're saying, I'm in early child education. I have my master's in education, been an educator for 30 years, taught everything from birth to college. And when you talk about equitability and pay and worthy wage, and we not only does that early child education, it's women based, but we also need men in that field, because there's something missing. I'm teaching boys and girls, but that male entity, but there's not enough pay. So pay equitability is not there. And I couldn't do my job if I wasn't married to someone who made more the money in the house. So when you talk about and people of color are in those fields, daycare centers, caregivers. So that's huge for me. The other thing is, you know, when we speak out too, it's the willingness to be vulnerable. Because when CubeSmart was being built years ago here, we went to a township meeting and we missed the wrong meetings every time. I mean, it was just like the planning, the zoning. So even it's all a civic lesson as well. And so I got up and I said to the lawyer of the developer, it's just like, this neighborhood needs a playground. You know, and I'm passionate, and like Maya said, it wasn't that simple. I was like passionate about, we need a playground, the children need a place to go. We're landlocked here, we don't have da-da-da, and he just laughed in my face. So that kind of thing, it was just like, okay, well, do I want to stand up to say something that I firmly believe in, to be laughed at by a man who makes a crap load of money being a lawyer for developers and he's also. So when Maya with Bishop Tube came along, same thing, Maya's passion, watching her in the township meetings, like, hell yeah, I could do that too. And if they laugh at me, that's okay, because my daughter's a survivor of brain tumors, and it's suspect that Bishop Tube had something to do with that. Because while when she was in a fetus, I was breathing in the toxicity. So, you know, and I'm just going to say to that point, Green Amendment for the Generations, when we had a panel, we started talking, there was a young woman who was asking the question as a young woman, and she might have been in her 20s, what do I have to offer? And the people, there were about 4 of us, and we all said, I'm 60, and there was the other people were a little bit older, and tell your story. Like, what brings you, what are you passionate about that you want to make a difference? So tell your story. And your story is just as important as my brain tumor story. So bringing a personal story to the thing, and Sarah, I totally get it. You know, everything's supposed to be a secret, including cancer. Don't tell anybody. So there's so many layers to it, but I just encourage, you know, yeah, for me, when the passion comes, yeah, I'll get up. And I seem to be surrounded by people who are very passionate as well. So that's it.
You made me think of something, Kate, when you were talking, actually 2 points, but in the Green Amendment work in New Mexico, there's this really amazing young man, Artemisio Romero y Carver. Really passionate. He's, I think this is his last year of high school. And one of the most striking things that he says as a young person, and I don't know exactly the facts and figures, but when he starts to speak, he notes how his life expectancy is dramatically shorter than the generation before him and the generation before, due to the climate crisis. And when he speaks that truth in the way he does, it's such a stunning realization. And you can hear how sad he is about that, that there's a little bit of fear there, and there's a tremendous amount of anger over the inequity of that. So I think just as Kate said, that there's a different, that different perspective is very powerful. We all have different perspectives, and we all have to be sure to come forth and speak our truth, whatever that looks like for us. And some people, and I've seen it, some people would suggest to him, just like I've said, they said, I see it happen all the time, that somehow, you're being too strident. Yeah, but when you're speaking the truth, and you're speaking your truth, and you're speaking powerfully, and you're saying what you believe needs to be heard, it's never wrong. It's never wrong. And the other thing that Kate made me think about when she was talking about the lawyer laughing in her face, like, what a jerk. I remember, and there's somebody chimed in and said that they were a single mother. Carolyn, I think it was. So Carolyn, for a long time, in the early part of my career, I too was a single mother. And, my daughter went with me everywhere, including hearings and things. And so did my son later, and they were 10 years apart. But anyway, at one of those early hearings, I think my daughter was actually there playing off on the side. And it was a township hearing over a development proposal that was going to devastate a wetlands. And I got up and I did my testimony. And then I spoke to the township ordinance and the law. And when I was done, one of the gentlemen up on the dais, he leaned, he got up, he said, thank you, Maya, for your passion. But if you were a lawyer, you would understand that that is incorrect. And then he proceeded to tell me whatever it was he wanted to tell me. So I stood there and I let him speak his piece. And I leaned in and I said, I am a lawyer. But, and he was just like, but the presumption that somehow, first off, I didn't have the right to speak. Second off, that I wasn't speaking accurately or correctly or intelligently. And third off, that I didn't have the same level of, I guess, training as that he was so much smarter because he was the lawyer in the room and I was just, the little blonde lady over there. I mean, that level of dismissiveness just shines through all the time. And that is their way of trying to get people to sit down and shut up. And that's what that lawyer was doing to Kate. I want you to sit down and shut up because what you have to say is powerful and poignant and convincing and is touching hearts and minds and convincing people to change their opinions. And so how am I going to get you to sit down and shut up? Not by doing, a more powerful defense or argument or articulation of, the truth, but by ridiculing you and trying to shame you into sitting down. And because you are a woman, I believe that I have to do that. Larry there, sitting behind Kate, powerful, powerful advocate. Guarantee you, if Larry had been the one to stand up and say those words, that would never have happened that way. That lawyer would never have behaved like that. And you can see the difference in the room, how the different people get treated. Young, the younger people, the Black woman in the room, the Native American leader, the short white woman in the room, right? And you can just see if they think they can get away with it, they will. And they want you to sit down and shut up. So.
I have to say, there was one time I wouldn't, and the solicitor asked the police officer who was in the room at the time, can you please remove her? And the police officer was like, you know what? I don't want that job. I don't want that job. I'm afraid of her. So I had a promise. At one point, it's just like, yeah, okay. There was a time for me to be quiet and sit down, but almost got kicked out of that meeting.
So my daughter loves to tell the story of one time when I was testifying before the DRBC, and she said she watched as the state trooper slowly walked down the aisle closer and closer and closer to me, because yeah, that's what they want to do. But Sarah, did you have, it looked like you were sitting, leaning forward. Did you have something to?
No, I no. I mean, I have more to say always, but not in particular. No, all this is, yeah. I guess I will say that I have had the same experience many times. I'm a certified arborist, and often people will say, well, I think I need a certified arborist to tell me. I'm like, well, I am one. Like, but I also don't need to be one. I think that's the other part of this, is like, I don't need to be, and that's kind of what you're saying too, I think, Maya, is like, I don't need to be a certified arborist to have a knowledge of this. Like just because there's a credential, like that helps from an insurance perspective, or from like, you know, whatever it is, depending on the field. But, you know, people have knowledge, lots of knowledge, and from lived experiences, from independent learning, and valuing the different ways that people come to know things. And yeah, and like, yeah, just what you were saying, Maya.
So Bridget, did you have another one to throw at us?
We do. We have a lot more. So thank you all. That's really helpful for sharing your stories and your insights. And thanks, Kate, for sharing with us as well. This question is sort of playing off of some of those stories that you've just shared. So you've all mentioned that how you've been treated when speaking out for the environment, being told you're too sensitive, being laughed at, being spoken over. If you're willing to, would you be able to speak at all towards how you care for yourself when dealing with these things?
Go ahead, Sarah.
I had good advice when, like a while ago now, from a woman who had more experience and time in the field than me, and she said to find a peer who didn't work with me, who I could just talk to about things, and like sort of cultivate that kind of relationship where it's a peer-to-peer support. And I have found that to be a really helpful thing, is having specifically women in my life who are also professionals, or who have had experience that is similar to mine in some way, and are really willing to listen, because it is sometimes traumatizing, to be honest. And kind of working through that is important. Acknowledging it is important. And I think also, like, having an actual self-care plan, sort of, you know, I go for a walk on Saturday and Sunday mornings down to a place where I almost always see seals, and that really helps. And so I do it now. I didn't do it today because I did a plant giveaway, but, oh, and that's the other thing, from a work perspective, always having, or at least knowing what work fills you up, and making sure that you protect that experience so that you can keep having the work experience that at the end of the day makes you, and I say that because I just had that kind of day-to-day where I did a plant giveaway. Everything went just like perfectly in terms of the kinds of community experience we had, and fills me up. And then I have more energy to do things again. And then I put less value into the mean things, like being completely on the mean things that people say sometimes that are really personal. Because I think that's the other thing, is that often these attacks, they feel and are intended to feel personal, that it's not about the principle or the issue at hand, but it's about me. And I think that's what other people experience too. And if you add on kind of like other ways that people are oppressed, then like you're adding on more ways that people are kind of targeted. So yeah, I guess I'll leave it there at that.
So a couple of things. So when I am at a public meeting or a public hearing, and there is something happening that's feels personal, feels hurtful, is frightening. I push myself to do what I know that I need to do. And the way I do that is to remind myself that if I walk away and I don't do it, I'll regret it. And that if I don't speak up and say it, then it's going to be left unsaid. And that natural resource, that river, that forest, that wetland, that fish, that human community that I am there to represent is going to be left without a champion. And they will be destroyed. And if I don't do everything I can to try to stop that, again, I will regret it. So in those moments, I really think about why I'm there, what my mission is, what is the natural resource or the community that I'm there to champion who won't have a voice if I don't speak up in the way that I do. So in those moments, it's sort of like a head game with myself. Right? Like I remember when I was young, I would never jump off of the high dive. Can I tell you how many times I got up, I walked to the end of the diving board, I looked down and I walked back because I'm afraid of heights. It was, and then every time I got to the bottom of the ladder, I said to myself, if I had just done it, it would have been over with by now. I remember when I was up in, was it Scranton or Stroudsburg? President Obama was there, right? And he was being pro-fracking, and we had gone there, and my mission was to stand up and shout out to President Obama about fracking and protecting the Delaware River from fracking. And I had like a folded up lawn sign in my pocket, and I was so afraid to do it. Not because I was afraid of what people would do, but like, that was like, he's the president. But I did my whole like, diving board thing. And then I made myself stand up and, shout out about defending the Delaware against fracking, and that fracking was devastating lives. And he said, yeah, you're right, or she's right about that, or something. I don't remember exactly what I said, but he like literally acknowledged it. And then, I went on, but I made that important point. But to do that was like that whole head game with myself. So in those moments, it's all about how do I push myself to do what I need to do. In terms of actual self-care, it is the same. I don't self-care. I do what I have to do whenever I have to do it for the earth, because that is why I'm here. That is my mission. That is what I am dedicated to. I am really doing my part to save the river, to save the world, to save the earth. And I can't sit down and shut up. And I can't, if something has to be done, the moment is now. If the tree is lost, if the river is polluted, if the child dies, you can't get those things back. Right? Like you can't get it back. So I can't sit down and shut up. And I can't stop, and I can't take that moment if I know that there's something that I can do to make a difference. And it is hard and it can be tiring, but that's sort of how that's my, my personal, I believe that that's why I'm here, and I have to grab every moment and every opportunity, because once the opportunity is gone, it is too late. I can't get it back. So I don't really self-care, but what I do is when I'm feeling really down or upset or angry, first of all, I have wonderful people like Bridget and Cherry and Connor and Fred and Tracy, and Kate and Larry, wonderful people who are just in my circle of life, which I just really value and appreciate. And I remind myself of that. And I say out loud all the time, I love my life. I truly love my life. I am honored to do the work that I do. It is a true honor, and I wouldn't want to be doing anything else. So in those moments when I feel like I should like give up because I'm really tired, I remind myself it's an honor to do this work and I love my life. And I pick myself up and I wipe away the tears or try to set aside and then I go on and I do it. So I guess that's my self-care, is just reminding myself about, I really do love my life. I love my workmates. I love my husband. I love my kids. I love my life. And I tell myself that. You know, you just heard me. Do you think I love my life? I do.
Thank you both so much for being willing to share that. I have a feeling a lot of us are going to be bookmarking this recording to come back to when we need advice and inspiration and pep talks in time like these. It's really, really helpful. So thank you. We're getting close to our last 15 minutes of the talk. I have one more question I want to ask now, and then just remind people a couple more questions, but remind everyone, if you want to get questions in now, do it now. And we're going to save a little space at the end for Maya and Sarah and any others who'd like to give some final remarks. But so there was a comment in the chat about how there can be a big difference in agencies, and I think also organizations and even companies that are run by women. And we're just wondering if either of you have thoughts on, when women lead, how do they lead differently, and what does that look like? What are the benefits and, you know, differences you get from that?
Go ahead, Sarah.
Okay. Well, I do see myself as a woman leader, and I am the leader of this organization, though I also like to think of it as a leader that is supporting the growth of other leaders too. And I feel like that might be kind of part of the big difference, is that I see my role as a leader to be one that helps other people be more successful at the things that they want to do, not just within the organization, but like beyond. Because I think when people feel supported, I mean, yeah, like I said before, like we need more people to want to participate, and we need more of the people who want to participate to feel like they can participate. And so growing leaders is, I think, like a really great way to do it. And so like within the organization that I'm in, that's a big part of what we do, is to let other people lead, let other people learn how to lead and make mistakes, and that's okay. And I think that might be a different, I feel like in the male-led organizations that I've been in, they have tended to be more hierarchical, and you know, this person's in charge, this person has a title that goes with that, and I say I do have a title, and then there's another person that has a title, they respond to them, and then somebody else responds to them, and you know, somewhere along the line in your pay depends on where you are in this role, and there's this idea that some people are more important in the organization than others. And I don't know if that is a male thing or if that's an old thing. I'm not old in age, but old in terms of like older institutions, whereas like our organization is relatively new. So, but that's what I have noticed in women-led organizations. There is more of a cultivation of leadership.
I agree with that. And I think also, at least for me, what I try to do, and I think what I see in others, is that there's really a more of an effort to support the whole person. And, you know, be mindful and understanding when somebody's sick, when somebody's having a hard time, when somebody's having an emotional moment, when somebody's lost a pet that's important to them, when somebody has a family member who's suffering or they lose a family member, is just having a difficult time emotionally, and you know, being supportive about that, hearing that, and you know, being supportive, having high expectations, but also understanding when people need space and time. Also holding people accountable when they make mistakes is an important part of leadership, but also understanding that you can hold people accountable in a way that helps them learn from the mistake. Also, I literally had an experience recently where there was a really big missed opportunity. It was a big mistake. But I knew that the person responsible for the mistake, I know them. And I knew that they were already berating themselves deeply and holding themselves accountable deeply. And that I didn't need to do that. That didn't need to be my role. So I gave it a little bit of time, and then came back to it and had a conversation and said, it was a mistake, but I understand that you are probably feeling it deeply and holding yourself accountable. And I could see from the person's expression that they felt horrible about it. But then the one thing that I reminded them was that there was a lesson to be learned from that. And the lesson to be learned is that to make sure that I was informed about that missed opportunity and that big mistake, and not make me find out about it in some other way, right? So I was holding them accountable, but in a way that was understanding and respecting that they were holding themselves accountable too. And again, just that idea of knowing who the person was and working with the person and making it a learning moment, not a let me beat you up moment and pile on to your already difficult emotions, because I know you're already feeling badly, right? I knew they already had learned the lesson of I won't make that mistake again, but what else can be learned from it? So I think that there's a lot more about respecting and supporting and knowing and nurturing the whole person. And that's why I know at the Delaware Riverkeeper Network, I think, we really do have, there's a definite sense of organization and mission, and we are colleagues, but there is also a deep affection and respect for one another. And I think that the way our staff appreciates one another comes from the culture of the organization, and the culture of the organization comes from that female nurturing whole person mindfulness that I guess I created. You might go talk to my staff and they may be like, oh, she's a liar. That's not the way it is. And, so you might, I know, like everybody on my staff's probably going to be getting a phone call, right? Like, is she really horrible? And then they might tell you that, and that would be okay. But I don't think that that's the way it is, because about half of my team has been with the organization for 10, 15, 20 plus years, right? And I don't think that they would have stuck around that long if I was really that horrible. So. And can I just say, so I do want to make a moment there was a really fun comment, and Glorianne, I do want to put you on the spot. This is a little bit off topic, but Glorianne Roby, who is an amazing leader in New Jersey in environmental protection, has done so many things and supported, right, so many advocates and leaders and organizations working for the environment and community protection. And she said something really funny. Where it is, she said something like, when women are at the table, when women aren't at the table, we are usually on the menu. So Glorianne, I don't know if you want to turn on your camera and your microphone and give a little bit more behind that insight, but I thought that was a good one.
Well, I think that's just, I think it's pretty well known. And I think when you get into politics, that's why it's good for women to get involved in politics, because you have to be at the table. You have to be there. And I think it's very, it's a truism, because if you're not there, you're on the menu. And that's what's been for women, and we're still there. So you have to fight it. You have to keep going. And thank you for the work that you have done. You have provided phenomenal leadership. And it's too bad you're not at the table. Okay?
You're wonderful. Thank you, Gloria.
Yeah.
You're
All
just
right.
an amazing inspiration for so many, and I'm so proud and honored that you're here tonight.
Well, you've got a great group, a great staff and yourself, and you're just a tremendous, I mean, a lot of this, like you just said, if you didn't stand up and say it, it would have been, the time would have passed and it would have been, and that would be the end of it. And so it makes a heck of a difference. So thank you. Take care.
All right. Thank you all for those responses. I have one more question left. I actually have a bunch more questions left that we aren't going to get to, but I have one more that will hopefully end us on a little bit of a high, hopeful note. And then whatever time we have left, you guys can share any final thoughts that you've had, through this discussion. So our last formal question is, what excites you about the future?
Go ahead, Sarah.
Okay. Let's see. Yeah, it's been a hard year, right? And I feel like it's worth acknowledging that, because in the context of what excites me, it's hard. There's this hesitation. I feel like that, what's next? But at the same time, I reflect and think so much is different than it was 22 years ago when I entered the workforce after graduate school. And, I remember teaching a class on climate change. Well, it was actually just environmental conservation class. And, many of the students didn't know anything about climate change. They had not been exposed to it at all. And the very next year, that changed. Like, there was something had happened in high schools and they had been required to learn about climate change. And ever since then, there is just like, it was kind of a slow but steady, and now it's a big burst of groundswell around climate change. And so it's not really a matter about awareness around climate change or environmental action. It's like how to turn up the volume and turn up the, impact, I guess, is really the big thing. And I feel like we have like really smart, educated, inspiring people coming up into the workforce. That does inspire me. And I think, as Maya was saying too, I see a difference in the way that people talk about diversity, the way people talk about environment, the fact that environmental intersections, or the intersectionality of environmental justice, is like a conversation happening all the time now. I think that's another thing. There are like conversations happening now that consistently happening that were like every once in a while, maybe a few years ago. And that I think is awesome. Yeah.
So say it again, Bridget. Don't worry, I don't have Alzheimer's or anything. It's just these questions are very thought-provoking, and I get too many thoughts after the question's been asked, and then Sarah says things and it's like, wow, that's really profound. And then I lose my own train. So
yeah, it's been tough to follow along for me, so I can't imagine as a panelist. So it's just, what excites you about the future?
So, oh yeah, so this is I don't know. What I know is that there really isn't one thing. We've had so many amazing successes. Really, it has been a different year, but every year for us is a difficult year at Delaware Riverkeeper Network. So many challenges, so many battles. Our battle to fight fracking, that has been going on since 2008, right? And yet we had this amazing success right after all this time of getting a portion of the permanent moratorium protecting our watershed turned into a permanent ban, and a pathway to get the rest of the protection turned into a permanent prohibition. And while we've had, the beginning of the year, there were 4 states where there were Green Amendment proposals across the nation. Now, at the beginning of last year of 2020, now there are 11. And in New York State, it's going to go before the voters. And in Maine, we're having amazing progress. And we had amazing progress in New Mexico and Hawaii. And it didn't get over the finish line, but there was all this great energy. And, our pipeline battles at the Delaware Riverkeeper Network, oh my gosh, there's such high hurdles. But yet we're going to do this really great briefing to get Congress to turn things around and reform the Natural Gas Act, right? And like I see, we're not there yet, but I can see victory. I see the hurdles, but I'm just constantly looking for and seeing the victories and the amazing people that I get to work with and that I meet. They're just all the people who are joining us tonight. In one way or another, I have been touched by you. I have learned from you. I have worked with you. And that's really what makes me hopeful, is that there are so many amazing people. And we have horrible people like Joe Manchin, who is going to be the sticking point for protecting voters' rights. But I see that we're going to get him over the hump. I'm trying to figure out what kind of protests can I do to get Joe Manchin to turn around. I'm sure he won't listen to me alone, but right. But I guess that's what makes me there are a lot of losses in environmental work. There are a lot of things, a lot of times when we lose, but through every single battle, I always see the victory. Even if I don't get there, I see it, and that's what excites me, and that's what keeps me going, and that I love my life, and it's an honor to do this work, and I wouldn't want to be doing anything else.
Sorry, my unmute button wasn't working. Thanks so much to you both and to everyone else who chimed in tonight with your insights and your stories. They've been inspiring and frustrating, and I think really relatable to a lot of people on here. Unfortunately, we're at the end of our time now, so it's time to wrap up our evening, but just want to thank you, everyone who joined again, for joining us for this cocktail party, and also thank our panelists again for taking the time to share their expertise with us. We've been so
And
happy.
one final cheers to Nancy Shakaitis. We lost her from the earth, but the Delaware River honors her, and we are all better for her having been with us. So, and Jennifer, thank you so much for joining us. Love, love, love all of you, and so honored. And just one final thank you to Nancy.
Cheers, and we hope everyone has a great evening. Thank you.